My guest today built a real estate investment firm that grew to over $20 billion in assets. He sold his first company at 29 years old for $20 million. By every measure the world uses to define success, he had already won. Then he walked away from that world and spent the next decade going undercover in some of the darkest places on earth, personally leading more than 70 child rescue missions in 15 different countries. Paul Hutchinson is the primary investor and executive producer behind Sound of Freedom. You may have heard of it, the independently produced film that every major studio passed on, and that went on to become the #1 independent film in the world. He's the founder of the Child Liberation Foundation, protecting more than 10,000 children every single month. He's been knighted, he carries the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, he was trained by CIA operatives and Navy SEALs, but none of that is the reason I wanted Paul on this show. I wanted him here because Paul is one of the clearest examples I've ever encountered of a person who had everything and then asked himself a harder question. What's it actually for? He has a new book coming out called Your Infinite Wealth. And I think by the time this conversation is over, that title is going to mean something very different to you than it does right now. Paul, welcome to the show. There's so much to start with and so much to talk about with you and your experience and everything you're involved in. What I'm really interested, because I haven't heard this story so much, is really your entrepreneur journey. You sold a company at 29 years old for $20 million. That sounds like an overnight success story, but I think anybody in the entrepreneur field knows it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So what is your origin story as an entrepreneur, and what got you to that point?
I think my origin story started when I was just a kid. I always had this hunger for business and creating things. I remember going in and telling my dad I wanted to take all the wood in the backyard and build a store out on our front porch. And he's like, "Really, a store?" I was like 7. And he said, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, "I'm going to just sell stuff." And I remember that was the first really big fight I had with my dad when he told me that I couldn't start building a store on the front porch. But over time, they pressured me to be a doctor. My dad always told me, he said, "Paul," he said, "you don't want to go into business." And I said, "Well, why not? You know, you're in business." And he had climbed the corporate ladder at his company and ended up owning the company over time, but it was a long haul. And he said, "You're not going to be any good at business." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because you suck at listening to anybody in an authority position." He said, "You have a real problem with authority." And I think that's his lens was based on the corporate game, not on being an entrepreneur. And he was right. I did have a problem with authority. I would rather own my own hot dog stand than have a job and have somebody tell me when I could go to the bathroom. And I think that's really at the core of it. People think that the business and entrepreneurial journey, that sounds easy. You know, you have your own time. Well, yeah, you have your own time working 14 hours a day, right? You want the easy road, go have somebody else take all the risks. Have somebody else make all the decisions. Have somebody else stay until 8 o'clock at night and you get to check out every day at 5. That's the easy road. Now, is it the secure road? No. Is it the road that's going to allow you to have 2 helicopters and 50 plus cars? No, it's not. You're never going to get there working a 9 to 5. But that is the safe, quote unquote, road. And so I recognize that if I didn't want somebody to be in an authority position over me at work, I was going to have to be the hardest boss I ever had. I was going to have to discipline myself to wake up. I tell young entrepreneurs, they say, "Well, how do I know if I'm cut out?" And I tell them this. I said, "Do you use an alarm clock to get your ass out of bed in the morning?" "Well, yeah." Why do you do that?" "Otherwise, I'd be sleeping until 10 or 11. I said, "Well, there's the problem. If you don't have a big enough why, if you don't have a big enough dream to motivate yourself to get out of bed excited about what you're creating, if you need to have that motivation, you might need a boss. You might need a job where you get fired if you don't show up by 9 a.m. That's just how it is. It's a whole different mindset as an entrepreneur. And that's once I started recognizing that indeed my problem with authority was going to be my superpower, not my downfall in business.
So you said you're the hardest boss on yourself. How does that translate to you being the boss of other people? Because you've ran companies, with thousands of employees, and you have a foundation with a lot of people working there as well. So because sometimes you're hardest on yourself, but are you also that hard on other people?
There's a chapter in my book, Your Infinite Wealth, that's the golden age of conscious capitalism that talks about approaching business in a very different mindset. And, I talk a lot in the book about a true win-win-win and a value for value in everything that you're creating in your business world. But then just to make sure that you don't get soft, there's a whole chapter on compassionate accountability and recognizing that letting somebody get away with subpar performance is a disservice to them and the company. And you can remove them with compassion. If I have a rat in my kitchen and that rat is, causing disease, I don't have to be angry and hate him. He's being the best rat he knows how to be, but he doesn't deserve to be in my kitchen, right? I can remove him. I can take him out of this life, but I can do so without the anger and hatred. Same thing when you're weeding your garden. If you're just, oh, I'm a compassionate capitalist, I'm just going to allow whatever happens. Well, no, your garden gets taken over by weeds. And so it's important to be disciplined in your your expectations of your employees in a way that's going to elevate them and elevate the company. Because the second that you allow somebody to take more than they are producing for the company, then you're not only hurting the company, you're hurting every single person that's putting their all in what you're creating.
Yeah. Now, is that something you had to learn like the hard way or just over time? Did you start out, because there's so many, when we see leadership icons, that we see in the movies or, that are idolized in our society, they're usually like pretty iron fisted. You do what I say or you're out of here. And that's the way you lead and you build a business. Did you evolve from one version of Paul Hutchinson to another when it came to that?
Absolutely. I've evolved in so many ways. We can go on for an hour and a half about the Paul effin Hutchinson I used to be before I kind of awakened in recognizing how my words and actions were affecting others. And this is one of the reasons why I put so much time into a book on conscious compassionate capitalism, because I recognized that one of the biggest problems with our world is the toxic energy and how we deal with each other. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about my work in anti-child trafficking. And just as a highlight here, I recognized after 10 years of doing undercover work and helping to rescue trafficked children, I recognized that we were never going to fix the problem pulling children out of hell. We needed to pull the hell out of humanity. And that started in the boardroom. It started with how we treat each other. If you go to work and you see your employees as subservient to you, as pawns in the game, so to speak, wherein they're dispensable in some way, they're a means to an end. When you're viewing humanity as anything other than an equal to you, as the divinity which is in them, then you start going down a dark road. I recognized after 10 years of doing undercover work in the darkness and rescuing kids that the common thread with the traffickers and even the perpetrators wasn't earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks. The common thread was arrogance and greed and lust. And I had to look in the mirror myself and ask myself, okay, Paul, how is arrogance and greed and lust and a disdain for other people who I don't think is as good as me, how is that showing up in your life? And that pattern is what helped me recognize that beyond Child Liberation Foundation, I needed to create something called Liberating Humanity. And what is Liberating Humanity? Liberating Humanity is liberating us from that toxic energy and how we deal with each other. And and it starts in every business deal. Anytime that you're creating something that is not a win-win-win, then you're out of integrity in some way. Nobody has to lose. We when we're trained to look at the world in a dog eat dog world, in a scarcity mentality, in a me versus them, if you think that you have to hurt or take away hundreds of millions from other people for you to have hundreds of millions more, then you're in the wrong mindset. And that energy is what fuels things like wars, like domestic abuse, like child trafficking. All of these things are tied to that same mentality of me versus them and ego and arrogance and greed and pride.
Yeah. So was that a realization you had like at a single moment because of an experience you went through, or was that just a gradual progression over time, looking yourself in the mirror, that is, and saying, what do I have inside of me?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. And this is something that I think it's important for people to be aware of because the laws will change in the US over the next 2 years. And it's important for responsible entrepreneurs and business owners to understand what I'm about to tell you. So many years ago, I was getting there success wise. I had billions of dollars under management. I think at the time I had 2 billion, not nearly the 50 billion we have today, but it was doing well. But my ego was bigger than if I had 100 billion. I had two helicopters. Um, I had stuff, lots of stuff, and lots of parties, and NBA players and NFL players at my house, and half dressed girls all the time, and it was just this energy. And I received a phone call from two of my undercover operators that I had done a lot of work with, Andy McCubbins and Jimmy Rex. Jimmy had done 13 missions with me, and Andrew had done 22. And these were some of the best men I have ever known. And on this call, they said, "Paul, do you trust us?" I said, "Yeah, I literally trust you with my life when we're doing those missions." They said, "You need to come to this healing retreat." And my exact words were, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul fucking Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me. They said, "No, you're on your second marriage headed for a divorce. Your children don't talk to you. You think that your happiness is going to come from one more party, one more car, one more helicopter, one more girl. And and you don't really see people because of whatever trauma that you're holding on to." And they had been working with some doctors and some scientists who had been working on the proper protocol for the use of things like psilocybin when it comes to trauma therapy and anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc. And now I understood that world of cognitive restructuring. That was the company I sold 35 years ago. So I understand mental health, but my ego was out of control. And and in this experience, it was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. David, in this guided meditation, breath work experience using the proper use of psilocybin, this facilitator took me into a space where I had pure empathy, like nothing I could ever explain. I felt in every cell of my being. I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom, as if I was them. The betrayal was so heavy. And I could feel the employee that I was dismissive, that came in that was super excited about what he had created, and it wasn't quite right. And I was out of integrity because of my issues at home or the traffic on the way to work. And I spoke unkindly, and I could also see the ripple effect of my actions, where he goes home now feeling the energy of me, and he yells at his wife, and the wife yells at the son and the son kicks the dog. And literally that tension transfer came from me being out of integrity. I could feel the ripple effect of the guy who came to my party and slept with a cheerleader and broke up his marriage. And a year later, his daughter gets abused by the new boyfriend, or the son is on drugs, literally
Mm,
because of how
yeah.
out of integrity I was. And it was so transformational for me that it completely changed everything. I believe that that experience is the reason why Sound of Freedom movie became the #1 independent film in the world. I believe that that experience is why our company went from 2 billion to 50 billion. I believe that that is experience is why everything in my life changed when I chose to look at my deeper connection with every person I speak to, every person I have any interaction with, and see the world literally as if I was them.
So how do you that sounds like a single experience. How do you sustain that? Is that something you have to do repeatedly? On a
It's so I've been working in mental health for 35 years with my company years ago, and sadly a lot of therapy options either take 10 or 20 years for permanent change, or they're quick fixes that really don't delve in. And I would encourage people to do some deeper research on that space. And this is so important, guys. I am not a fan whatsoever of legalizing some of these plant medicines and then having our kids go to rave parties and getting high with their friends on mushrooms. This is not only a bad idea, it's dangerous. And let me explain why. I think this is important for entrepreneurs and business owners to understand what's going on for our long-term change. If you imagine that your subconscious mind is a brick of gold, and it's literally running 95% of our life, and it's difficult to change. It's kind of hardened. It takes 21 days to create a new habit, chiseling at the outside of it. Well, when we're kids, 0 to 9, 10 years old, that brick of gold is in flow state. It's in a state of what we call neuroplasticity. We're very impressionable. We can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time, that we can learn how to ride our bike and eat and everything else. And if something happens during those impressionable years, it's not just a surface level thing on your brick of gold. A lot of times it gets embedded super deep. If your uncle does something horrible to you, or even something simple, your father just says you look ugly and blue, whatever it is, if those things get embedded in our subconscious mind and they dictate how our relationships, our addictions, our anger issues, our anxiety, depression, all of these things are literally being fueled by something deep inside that gold bar, inside of our subconscious mind. Well, there are ways in using breath work and meditation and different types of the plant medicines that we can help people go back into a temporary state of neuroplasticity, that flow state of your subconscious mind. And in a very real sense, do 10 and 20 years worth of therapy in 3 to 4 days. I've seen it over and over. We started with our veterans. I had Green Berets with 300 missions in Afghanistan, already had PTSD, and one undercover mission with us, and seeing a menu with children's faces and prices, it would just screw them. They would be done. We were losing operators. And we started bringing them into these healing retreat experiences and completely wiped their PTSD to live a normal life. And then we brought in women who dealt with dealt with issues from their childhood. Now I work almost exclusively with business owners, with entrepreneurs, royalty world leaders have come in, but guys like where I was, that if I can help them learn how to release the toxic energy of how they're showing up in their family and how they're showing up in the boardroom, if I can help them just recognize that on a deep level, then we can influence millions of people through their influence.
So what do you say? Because I don't want to be toxic, but I also don't want to lose my edge. I don't want to become this, I get this picture in my mind, and maybe some other people do too, of becoming this, soft and cuddly, empathetic beta male, right? And I want to keep my edge and charge forward because that's who I identify as. So what And what do you say to the person who, like, I can't think of any trauma I have in childhood, right? I had there's some stuff during my military days and some stuff I saw that did come up at one point in my life and rear its head, that I addressed. But yeah, you said, of course not. So meaning I may not even remember if there was. So why would I want to go back and enter and remember it if my
Yeah, it's
subconscious has done such a good job of putting it out of my memory?
well, it's not like that. It's not, sadly, a lot of traditional therapy. They're like, okay, let's go back to your 3-year-old self. What was the pain that you felt when you're, no, you don't need to relive that pain. Even in our healing retreats and our safe houses for the children who have been trafficked, we don't want them to go back in and relive it over and over. That's re-traumatizing them. But you can change. The key is in changing the perspective. And you don't have to lose your edge as the alpha male. I'm more alpha male than I have ever been, and I've been pretty alpha. But you can have your edge. You can be alpha. You can be in charge of everything in your life, and you can control it in a way where you're not using toxic masculinity to do so. You can do so from a place of of power by seeing things from somebody else's perspective and creating a win-win-win. I'll give you an example, with and a lot of these things changed after I had started making my changes years ago. But when the 2008 crisis hit, most people in real estate and in the fund management business, most of them just lost their shirts. It was a horrific experience for most people who were in real estate. Those were the years that we flourished. And the reason behind it is this. You've heard the old saying, the best time to make money is when there's blood in the streets. It's
Yeah,
attributed
right.
to Baron Rothschild, years ago. It's true, but don't make money from the blood, not from the people who are suffering. Instead, say, okay, there's going to be blood in the streets. How do I make money by creating first aid kits, right? How do we provide a solution? Back when the 2008 crisis, when it was coming on hard, there were so many banks that were taking back assets that couldn't manage them. It was we got on a top level purchasing platform with all the GSEs, with Freddie, Fatty, HUD, FDIC, and we would get a call when a bank had 30 days to live. By then, the bank president's willing to negotiate. He realizes he's going to be out of a job in 30 days and his shareholders have a big fat zero if something doesn't happen. At that point, I can go in and we were able to say, okay, that $100 million portfolio of apartment complexes you have, we'll pay you $30 million cash on Friday. And that gives you the liquidity you need to be able to restructure. You're going to have to take some write downs, but you're not going to be out of business. And so it was a win for the banks. Then we have now an asset that the bank wasn't managing very well. There's weeds in the, and the pool wasn't working and all, the occupancy rate, all this crap was going on. So we had a team that could deliver. And by stepping in the shoes of the tenants, we could provide real value for them. I can do that from a compassionate standpoint. I don't have to be a scumlord. I can be a landlord that is providing real value. We would bring in the bookmobile and English as a second language and things like that because we had a lot of Latino tenants that were in these. We took the tennis courts that had 4-foot weeds in them. We mowed those down and we put little soccer leagues in there. So thinking from their perspective is good for business and is strategic. I don't have to hurt them. I can create real value for them. We're expanding where everybody else was losing their jobs and shutting down their companies. We were expanding, hiring people all the time. So we had employees that were happy. We paid out in 2009 when the rest of the market was losing 30 and 50%. We didn't lose any principal. In fact, 2010, we paid out a 48% return to our investors. So it was a win for our investors. And now every one of the partners has 14,000 square foot homes, and private jets. Why? Because we created real value all the way around. So you can be on your edge. You can be there. You can be the alpha male. You can create real, tangible value and do so from a place of compassion in simply putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, I love that because we're so used to operating in a zero sum economy. That's how I refer to it. The mainstream traditional financial model out there is for somebody to win, somebody else has to lose, and you're creating win win win. And I think there's absolutely a place for that. And do you credit that to your growth? Because you kind of credited the change in your perspective, but when did that win 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 mentality come in? Was that from the get go in creating that company, or did you progress to that?
It's always a line to walk, and you have to check yourself. How am I in integrity? Am I out of integrity? John Pennington and I were the co-founders of what was originally Bridge Loan Capital and became Bridge Investment Group. And in the beginning, in the very beginning, it was literally just me and John, and we were in this little office. It was so small that we would bump elbows as we turned around. And we built the fund to $10 million just in this little teeny fund, a little teeny office. And I remember one time I was making phone calls. We had a deal where we needed $25,000 by Friday. And I'm making phone calls trying to raise some extra money for this deal. And I turned around and I put my little finger by my mouth, kind of like Austin Powers, right? And I said, John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday. And John was like, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday. And I remember a conversation we had that evening. He said, Paul, he said, you know that neither myself nor you have the pedigree, the background, anything to run a multi-billion-dollar investment fund. He said, I said, yeah, but if we build it right from the beginning, and this is one of the reasons I love John so much. He is truly a man of integrity. I knew that I could put my grandma's money in the fund, and I knew that it would be taken care of. John would never do anything that would cross that. And I think that's a key in picking partners, especially. You can, it's integrity all the way. And so he said, yeah, but if we build it right, if we build it with integrity from the beginning, we will attract the right team. And indeed, that's what happened. And a lot of the decisions we made early on were based on how do we create a true win-win-win. And so it's a process. It's a process that we all have to go through. We have to take self-assessments. In my Infinite Wealth book, at the end of every chapter, I have what we call integration, in which I have the entrepreneur take some real, true assessment of how he or she is showing up in the world based on the things that we just went through in the chapter. And so it's a constant thing. I find myself even today asking myself, okay, is this creating a real win for the employees here at the sanctuary? Is this creating a win for everybody in the philanthropy world that we're working? Everything. It's just a constant check.
And I think your warning, or you're a personal example about you become successful, you become bigger, and you kind of start believing your own BS, right? And believing the hype around yourself. And it sounds like you surrounded yourself with some good people from the beginning who would be honest with you. What would you tell people who maybe are just kind of going it alone right now, and they're pushing, they're just doing whatever they can to build that dream? How do you find those people? How do you find the right people? People you could do a handshake deal with, even without doing paperwork.
I have I have a chapter early on in the book on um, on meditation. Now, and I started out, I'm like, yeah, why would I have a book on creating wealth and finance? Why would I have anything regarding, closing down your mind? And don't we want to be just active all the time? But I recognize, in fact, I have another book in the future coming out called Are You Listening? With My Hand on My Heart. Not are you listening here on the ear, but are you listening here? And the truth is, there's, whether you call it the super conscious mind in the spiritual world, or whether you just go back into your subconscious, there is information that comes in all the time that you can pick up on. And I'll just for the sake of just our guys that don't want to go to the spiritual world, let's just talk about, there's a book I had our operators read called The Gift of Fear. And in The Gift of Fear, he talks about how our conscious mind is processing about 40 bits of information per second, but our subconscious mind is processing an extremely high amount of information. Literally, every single step you took today, your subconscious mind remembers. Every stoplight you ever stopped at, your subconscious mind remembers. When you're having a conversation with somebody and their pupils are dilating at the time that they're saying something, and there's cues on the fact that they're not speaking the truth, your subconscious mind picks those up. And, when it came to the undercover work, you're walking into a restaurant. There's a guy in the far corner of the alley that's got a coat on too heavy for the day. Your subconscious mind picks up what's in your peripheral. And so with that alone, in understanding that there's so much more information, trusting your gut when you're connecting with people is vitally important. There's a man that well, I tell it in detail in the story, but there's a man I met in my early 20s who was one of the highest IQs in the world at the time. He was the highest IQ ever tested at the University of Utah, yet he had never graduated from third grade, and he couldn't read or write. But he was the inventor of countless medical devices. And in fact, the original software that Siri, that voice recognition was built off of, he created that. And he taught me early on that by simply learning to tune in and listen to something more than what's in our conscious mind, we can gather so much more information. So we teach at our retreats, we teach meditation techniques and teaching people how to just get out of their conscious mind, get into their heart space, and then ask very clear questions about the direction that they're going, the people that they're working with, the everything that's going on in their business life, and have had tremendous results with business owners who are able to get out of the climbing the ladder, leaning against the wrong wall. Because we spend all day just running, 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 running. And if you just take a second to get quiet in the mind, tie into that space in your heart, then you'll be so much more productive in your day, and you'll be able to identify those people who are in alignment with your highest and best self.
I can see why you wrote a chapter about that because I notice it in myself. Sometimes I'll go an entire day without a lack of stimulation whatsoever. I'm on a call, I'm doing emails, I get up and I go for a walk around the neighborhood, but I'm not going to go with just my own thoughts. I'm going to put my AirPods in and listen to a book. Could that be a form of meditation, just walking around, talking to yourself or I guess taking it in, or do you have to actually sit in a dark room with your eyes closed?
No, no, there's active meditation, but I will say that, and I'm like you, I've been ultra productive so much of my life. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm driving in my car and I'm listening to the radio, I'm wasting that time. I could be listening to an audio program, a book or something that's educating my mind. And so I've always been just doubly productive in everything that I'm doing. But I found that taking some time to listen to just the birds as I'm walking, right? Or listen to some frequency music while I'm sitting quietly, and finding ways to not be just feeding my mind with this constant barrage of information coming in and out. That in that quiet space is where you'll find the most profound answers to your deepest questions.
That's great. I remember actually, I was going through a struggle in my business and I needed somebody to help me. And I consciously went for walks without any, stimulation whatsoever, listening to anything else and just thought on that. And I guess just to prove your point, within about a week, a name came to mind. And I reached out and that person's been working with me alongside me for a few years now. Um, that's great. So I really want to talk about, I mean, one of the way I came to know you was through the movie Sound of Freedom and then seeing you speak at this event. Um, I got to say, and I'm sure you've heard this so many times, like that, how much that movie impacted people. I took I got some advice from somebody else to go see that movie and take my kids. I took five of my kids. The other two were too young, a couple young girls, 10 and under. I didn't want to expose them to that just yet. Um, but the way that impacted me was significant as a father. So one thing I'm always looking to learn from other people, right? And I think most people out there want to learn how to become better at, especially business owners. It's not just you want to become better at your business. I want to become a better father, a better husband, a better brother, a better partner, whatever it may be. What what can I do as a father to, I guess, protect and educate my kids about this child trafficking and all, the evil in the world around that?
It's an important question. And, you know, so many people would leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they're like, okay, I want to do something. You know, I worked in the military. I want to go rescue kids. I want to go fix this problem. And, you know, it brings out a lot of emotions there. And I tell people the worst thing that you can do is go to Mexico and try to do undercover rescuing kids. You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your kids. And people are like, well, you know, how does hugging my kids, how is that going to fix trafficking? Well, the majority of children who are taken, who are moved from one place to another, the majority of them don't come from a healthy home. They're runaways. They're a broken foster care program or broken homes. And so the more you can do to hold that nuclear family together, the better chance they have of not being taken and moved to another place. Now, the biggest danger though for your children, for my grandchildren, the biggest danger for them isn't lurking behind in a dark alley. The biggest danger for them is in their backpack, is in their back pocket, is in their access to the internet. And 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 I'm okay with the kids having their own social media, but it doesn't need to be open and accessible to the entire world. It can be accessible to their verified friends because there are so many predators that will use those ways to connect with your kids. The biggest danger, according to the FBI, of our children in this world is something called sextortion, where 12, 13, 14-year-old boys on Robles or, you know, some online platform are gaming on this platform, and they get contacted by somebody they think is another, you know, a 13-year-old girl who then convinces them to move over to a private conversation on Signal or WhatsApp or whatever, and then their conversation goes to send me some pictures and back and forth, and pretty soon they're saying, hey, you know what? These pictures are going to go all over your school unless you send us some money or unless you meet at this certain place. And it wasn't a 13-year-old girl. It was a 45-year-old dude talking to your son and extorting him in this way. And there's been kids that have committed suicide. It's a big, big problem. Beyond that, it's so important for parents to have healthy relationships with their children where they can very comfortably come to you and say, Dad, um, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry. He touches me weird, and he says that we should have secrets outside of you. Or, hey, this babysitter said that we should trust her more than you, and she's shown us pornography. Or, you know, I don't like going to this friend's house because a brother was taking pictures of us when we're changing, and now he says he's going to send him around the school unless we meet him and his friends here. The majority of children, well over 90% of children who experience sexual abuse, it's familial. It's either a family member or somebody that the family knows. And
Yeah.
so, you know, no sleepovers. Don't do that, you know, unless you really know that family and have a relationship. And you know, you say that I agree, you know, I wouldn't take kids younger than 10 to go see Sound of Freedom. But at the same time, those conversations are important. For men, 1 in every 5 men have been a victim of sexual abuse at some time in their life. And most of them is when they were children. 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own home or a family member's home. And so when your kids are 4 or 5 years old, they should know what their privates are. They should know that, hey, these are things that nobody gets to touch, nobody gets to take pictures of. And if any adult says that you should trust them more than you, or they're trying to control, then you need to talk to us about it. You don't have to go into the birds and the bees with them, but help them understand where their boundaries should be. Because it's the numbers are staggering of how many people, literally almost half of the women who are listening to us today were a victim of that kind of abuse as a child. as a child. And most of them don't talk about it. The average age is 52 years old of somebody talking about it. Most of us don't remember it. And so if we can simply just help people heal, help people recognize there might be some heavy stuff there, but that's okay. We don't have to relive it, but we can heal through it. And make sure that we protect our children, we can stop this generational transfer of abuse that is so prevalent in our world.
Yeah, I've heard the term hurt people, right? And it's just perpetuated and continues down the line. So, yeah, that's powerful. So, in your experience with child trafficking and creating the foundation and all that, that's a whole different type of leadership. Like from what you did with, Bridge Investment Group or the mental health platform, or even maybe the retreats that you lead with business owners now. Um, I've always found one of the toughest things of leadership in my experience is getting people to follow you. Right? That's the definition of leadership. You're not a leader if nobody's following. How do you inspire and motivate people to go into these dark places or to follow you along on a journey where maybe there's no guarantee of success and there's a lot of risk involved? Like what have you done? I mean, they go back to just a business owner trying to make their first hire. How do you bring somebody on and get them on the team and heading in the same direction without them trying to pull you somewhere else or do their own thing?
I think your unwavering conviction that you're going the way that you're going on purpose, on a mission. People seek leaders who don't have fear that's whispering in their back ear. And I'll give you an example. When I was in Haiti, and there was a team that was there already for a few days, and one of the main operators, I was there just uh, with some influencers that were filming some of the kids in the orphanages that we had helped to rescue, and he said, "Paul, I've had a team out in the last five days. I haven't found anything. You're the best I have. Can you go out with them?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll go out." So I was out. It was about 2 a.m. Down now, Port-au-Prince, Haiti is the most dangerous city on the planet right now, and has been for quite a while. And it was 2 a.m. We were in a super dangerous area, and hadn't found any connections. And I said, "Guys, can I take lead? Are you good with that?" And they're like, "Yeah. I've heard you're really good at this. I want to see what you do." I said, now by this time I had led 30 plus missions in 12 different countries. And I said, "Okay," I said, "I need you to understand how I see fear and faith." A lot of people think that faith is a religious thing. You go to church and ask God to fix things in your life that you don't believe are going to be fixed. That's not faith. Faith is a principle of power. It's the most, next to unconditional love, it's the most powerful law in the universe. And it's simply this: it's the unwavering conviction that what I want to have happen will happen. It goes back to the John story with our little teeny office. We're going to be $1 billion fund. If you don't have the vision of where you're going, and it's got to be an inspiring vision, it's got to be something that just gets people excited to wake up in the morning before their alarm clock so they can follow you onto the battlefield. They need to see somebody that has no fear, that's willing to go out there and risk, and isn't looking around back on his shoulder saying, "I hope you're on the bus." If you're on the bus, great. If you're not, that's okay. But I'm going this way. And so I tell these guys that fear and faith. I'm literally 2 a.m. in downtown Port-au-Prince. Fear and faith cannot exist in the same person at the same time. And the reason behind it is that in a way they're the same power. People who believe bad things will happen to them actually attract those things into their lives. People who believe good things happen attract those into their lives. And so we're there at 2 a.m. I threw in a little. I said, "Look, this isn't a religious conversation." I said, "But I believe in God, and there's not a virtue. I don't care if you think that God is a cloud or a universe, or it doesn't matter. There's not a virtuous creator of the universe anywhere that's okay with an 8-year-old being abused. So I'm going to tune in to that guidance, and with no fear." I'm just gonna go. And I said, okay, these guys are like, okay, whatever, dude. I says, okay, just drive. And they're driving. I said, okay, stop right there. He said, the motorcycle gang guy there, the black alley. I said, yeah, right there. He said, what are you gonna do? I said, that guy knows something. I can feel it. He said, well, this is a really dangerous area. We've got to survey the area first. I said, no. I said, we don't have time for that. He's going to be gone. I said, in fact, I mean, some of these guys were Green Beret guys and they're big, muscle. I'm just me. And I said, listen, you guys are going to intimidate him. Stay here in the car. I'm going to go out and talk to him myself. And he's like, what, are you stupid? I said, look, I'll buy you pink panties when we get home. I don't have 2 weeks to find out who's selling kids. That guy knows something. I get out, walk up. He literally pulls up his shirt and there's a gun that's tucked in his pants. And I'm just listen. I pull out a bill. I don't remember if it was a 20. I think it was 100. Gave him a bill and he says, what's that for? I says, that's for you. You keep it. I says, I have another one for you if you can help me with something. I got some rich friends in the US that are coming here and want us to help set up a party, and they're interested in XYZ. They're looking for kids. And boom, we were able to take down the largest child trafficking network in the Caribbean through the connections I had from there. And so, and it comes with just having a no fear attitude. And when I was 21 years old, on my first luxury car that I bought, my license plate says no excuses. It's NOXQSES, and on the license plate cover it said feel the fear and do it anyway. Fear is you will not have the following if you're dealing with self-doubt and fear. You've just got to decide what it is that you want and just let everything that is stopping you from having that pure unwavering faith to accomplish it.
I like that. It's kind of like that, maybe it was Teddy Roosevelt quote, somebody like that, that fear is not or courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing it anyway. Just like you said, lean into it. Um, that's great. Paul, this is amazing. I would like to know a little bit more about your book, Infinite Wealth, where we can find that. And, and where we can find more information on you, and especially if anybody wants to and I mean, I've been supporting your foundation for a few years now because it's something I truly believe in. I'm not going to go on missions, like you said, to Mexico. I don't see that fitting into my life at this time. Maybe in the future, who knows? But one thing I can do is contribute to the cause. So tell us about your book and where we can find you and participate.
The Sound of Freedom is available on Amazon now. The Sound of Freedom, the true stories behind the film, and Your Infinite Wealth will be out within the next 2 months. I've just finalized it. It's at the publisher. They're just putting the final touches on it, and so that one you can pre-order. You can actually get a free copy of the first 3 chapters by going to liberatinghumanity.com. And on liberatinghumanity.com, you can just click and get your first 3 chapters so you can get a feel for what it is before the book even comes out. Now, we are going to collect your email address, and I'm going to spam you with all of the cool stuff that we're doing, but
like any business owner would, right?
That's right. We're going to send you information about the Child Liberation Foundation and whatever, but you can get involved with helping the foundation by going straight to childliberation.org, or there's links on Liberating Humanity to things that you can do to keep your kids safe, things that you can do to help people overcome their own trauma, all of these things. In fact, I have a new a new group of videos that's coming out next month on Liberating Humanity on our social media that is all teaching people how to meditate. Teaching people, because a lot of us don't. We're like, I pray, but I don't meditate. Well, there's a one-side convert. I'll just touch on this just for fun. So many people are like, and I was this most of my life. My conversations with my creator were very one-sided. It was praise, sorry, fix. Can you imagine having a healthy relationship with somebody where that's your conversation? You call up your new girlfriend, your wife, or whatever, and say, "Hey, you're so beautiful. Sorry, I crashed the car, and I'll fix it." And can you clean up the room when you get back? And then you hang up the phone. If you're not receiving, then it's not a conversation. And so, learning how to quiet your mind, tune into that place of the heart, receive that guidance in the most important areas of your life are things that we're teaching on the new YouTube channel for Liberating Humanity as well.
Great. Well, I love the title of the book. Like if I was going to write a book on finances, it would be Infinite Wealth. You stole it. So you got to it first. I guess I'll have to figure out something else if I ever decide to write a book. But that is so ideal that I'm looking forward to reading that. So I'll absolutely be on that list as soon as it comes out. And maybe we can have you back on to talk about that book or, future endeavors that you get involved in. I have a feeling you're not going to stop or slow down anytime soon.
Not even close. Not even close.
Yeah.
This is guys like you and I. This is what we were bred for. We're creators. We're builders. We're doers. We're creating value in the world. Get to the end of our life and we realize all we did is sit in front of the TV all day. Then we would be sorely disappointed in ourselves. Dave, I want to, in front of your audience, thank you. Thank you for your donations, your contributions to the Child Liberation Foundation, and your support for us for a number of years now. And incredibly grateful for you bringing me on, trusting me with your audience on your show as well. And so truly, truly grateful for that.
Well, it's been my pleasure. So thanks for joining us, Paul. We look forward to hearing from you again in the future. And I hope everybody reaches out and learns a little bit more about what you're involved in.
Love it. Thank you, Dave.
All right. Thanks.